Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Labella Associates, dedicated to the pursuit of partnership for more than 40 years, offering services in the development of buildings, infrastructure, environmental, and energy projects. Labella, powered by partnership. LabellaPC.com.
From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour was made in Massachusetts in 1812. When Governor Elbridge Gerry had the voting district maps redrawn in his state. He had this idea that he could redraw the maps to favor his own party and achieve a kind of political dominance. The Boston Gazette newspaper observed that one of the new districts appeared to be shaped like a salamander. Days later, a political cartoon satirized that district as not a salamander, but a Governor Gerrymander. A new political term was born, gerrymandering, and for 200-plus years, voters have been tormented by this odious practice. Voters do not like it if you ask them about it, but gerrymandering is not new. We are, though, now in a kind of gerrymandering arms race. The Supreme Court decided it cannot be prohibited. The court's 2019 ruling in Rucho versus Common Cause said that partisan gerrymandering was a political issue that the court could not interfere with. The 2026 midterms are coming, and so the Trump administration had an idea last year. What if, instead of waiting for typical redistricting processes in 2030, states that are controlled by Republicans could move to redraw the maps now and potentially strangle the number of Democratic majority voting districts? They scored a big victory in Texas last year doing exactly that. Then California Governor Gavin Newsom vowed a kind of gerrymandering revenge, and California passed its own redistricting. This week, voters in Virginia did the same, narrowly passing a new map that will dramatically favor Democrats. Progressive writer Adam Serwer had this to say, quote, "Voters in Virginia approved a lopsided congressional map on Tuesday, reducing the expected number of Republican-leaning districts in the Democratic-controlled state from 5 down to 1. Republicans have reacted by complaining that conservative voters in the state have been disenfranchised by gerrymandered maps that reduce the influence of their vote. And they're right. That is exactly what the new Virginia map does. Gerrymandering is an attempt to thwart the will of the voters. It circumvents the vital process of democratic feedback by insulating politicians from political backlash. It should not happen, and yet this latest chapter of the redistricting wars did not begin in Virginia." End quote. It likely won't end in Virginia either. Florida could move next. Indiana Republicans notably thwarted President Trump and said that they would not do the same last year. But the doors for this have been kicked wide open. And here to talk about it and talk about what voters should get and what a better process might look like, let me welcome our guest in studio. Austin DeLorme is president of the University of Rochester College Republicans and a columnist for Right Side Talks. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me, Evan.
Avi Presberg is executive director of the Monroe County Democratic Committee. Welcome back to the program to you.
Thank you, Evan.
So let's start with this here. Austin, as a young Republican, a lot of what we saw this week was voters in Virginia saying, we may not want this, but we didn't start it. You started it. Did your party start this?
I think that historically we've always kind of seen this discussion of gerrymandering, especially like in a state of New York. We've seen it in the past. It's happened, and then it was overturned, and it happened again. So I don't know necessarily who's to blame for the start of it, but most recently, the Republicans in Texas did do it, and I think that kind of started this cascade of events, which I don't like. I don't like the idea of gerrymandering, partisan gerrymandering, or any gerrymandering, but that's kind of the situation that we're in now.
Yeah, and to your point about New York, by the way, when I first got to New York State in 2003, covering politics, I was covering Congresswoman Louise Slaughter, and her district at the time went from the city of Rochester, and then that district went right up to the edge of the lake and went all the way west, all the way down to the city of Buffalo. I thought it looked like a rotting banana, but people called it the dumbbell district or the barbell district, and it looked like a weight. And it looked absurd to me, but you're right at the time. And I think Democrats in her district had a 100,000 vote or registration edge. I mean, so, and that was my first introduction to it. Congressman Tom Reynolds had a big advantage as a Republican in his district, and so on and so forth it goes. It's not new to the point, but are you more troubled right now by anything of what you're seeing, or is this part of a sort of a historical trend?
I mean, it's always been a historical trend, but I am concerned about it. And, even in New York right now, like with Congresswoman Tenney's district that goes all the way from Watertown to Niagara Falls, around Rochester, that is a gerrymandered district that is supposed to favor the Democrat Party, so they have more seats. So I think that both sides do it. Both sides are wrong for doing it. I think that Republicans and Democrats need to stand firm in saying that on either side in every state, we need to go back to these independent commissions that they've been trying to pass in the state legislatures, and that voters overwhelmingly have supported when it's come to referendum.
Avi, how do you see the latest round of this, and how do you contextualize what happened in Virginia this week?
Yeah, I mean, it's a desperate power grab by the Trump administration to avoid any accountability in the midterms. The American people are not happy with what is going on. They're not happy with how this administration is conducting itself. They want to put a check on this administration, and it's doing everything in its power to avoid that. So, as far as I see as far as I think about what happened in Virginia, it's the people standing up. And if Virginia voters want Republican representatives, there's nothing stopping them from getting that. They can go out there and they can vote and beat the turnout projections that created this map. But Democrats did not start this fight. Democrats have been leading the effort to create independent redistricting commissions. And if Republicans want to move towards that after this cycle, we would certainly welcome it.
Yeah. So, Avi, what do you make of the argument that we're hearing from Republicans this week that says, look, your party, the Democrats, have been more vocal over the years, condemning gerrymandering and calling for an end to it. And yet California happens, Virginia happens. And if you've got principles, you've got to stand on them, not sacrifice them when things are hard. What do you think?
The Republicans usually stand on small government and fiscal responsibility. I don't see any of that out of the current administration, and I think that Democrats need to use every tool in our belt to fight against them. So while I think that Democratic voters will turn around very quickly and return to their position of independent redistricting commissions, AOC is spot on. Now is not the time for Republicans to complain about political tactics.
Okay, so when you talk about pivoting when the dust settles here, and looking at redistricting commissions here, let me ask both of you. I'll start with you, Avi. Ideally, what would that look like?
Ideally, every state would have an independent body with Democrats, Republicans, and nonpartisan members that would be responsible for redrawing these maps every 10 years. Ideally, we would codify that you cannot change your maps in between censuses, and those bodies would be empowered to truly do that work. That I think is the gold standard.
And those bodies would not be composed of just people from one party or another?
No, never.
Okay. Do you agree with Austin's critique that in this state, for example, you look at Congressman Tenney's district, it is a huge geographic area.
Sure.
And the allegation, which seems pretty firm, pretty solid to me, is that, well, you got a lot of Republicans from up near the Thousand Islands sweeping all the way through this rural section, south of Rochester, then north back up to Niagara Falls, and we can just stick them in one district.
Sure.
And, they'll win that district, but then they won't win a whole lot of other districts if we can all stick them in one. Is that what that looks like?
I mean, what other districts would they win? Are we proposing that representation is like that those voters are better served by a representative that also has the city of Rochester or the city of Buffalo?
I'm asking you if you think the intention of a district like that is just to group as many like voters.
I would not. I have no evidence to support otherwise. I haven't looked at that district carefully. But my point is that representation is challenging. New York State does have an independent redistricting commission. It's why we're not in the middle of this fight. Our governor made it clear, and I think a lot of Democrats in this state would be more than willing to redistrict to push Republicans further into smaller numbers in congressional representation. But we're not doing that because we did pass an independent redistricting commission, and we don't have the ability to change that. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. We need more states around the country to have that codified into law. But until that happens in Virginia and Texas and California, we are where we are.
Okay. So what kind of process do you want to see, Austin, when the dust settles with all of this mess with gerrymandering? What needs to happen next?
I mean, I think, again, in a very similar way, I would like something where you could have a Republican and Democrat and then have independent organizations or bodies contribute like they do in New York to the discussion of what the maps look like. But to the point that, New York has an independent commission and therefore we have like maps that are like the end all be all very good is not necessarily true, because even when we had those maps, redistricting kind of like happened, and with that redistricting, we had those gerrymandered maps that then the courts came in and said, we're going to redraw these maps, and a judge redrew them. So I think that it's not a fail-safe, but there's definitely things that we need to do constitutionally in different states, such as Virginia, Texas, California, to codify, these institutions as being independent and more fair. But we don't really see that, as we saw in Virginia, voters, which I think voters need to be heard, and there's a right to have voters in on these conversations, but there's still a way to circumvent that process of being fair and impartial.
To be fair to Avi, I don't think I heard you make the claim that like sort of New York's maps are kind of a be-all end-all.
No. I'm not trying to claim that at all, but I'm just saying I think a lot of people see them as, fair because we have an independent commission, not necessarily.
They're fairer because we can't reset them in the middle of a decade when it either favors our president or not, or the president that we're trying to challenge. That's the point that I was making about independent commissions. At this point, there certainly are harder questions about representation, and you can get into the weeds on that. But
so let me just stop you. Say more about the point that you're making there about in the middle of a decade. So 2020 redraw, 2030 is supposed to be the next redraw.
Yep.
So what's the difference you see in Republican dominated states versus Democratic dominated states into what the process has been trying to gerrymander?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of our country is built on norms, right? It's built on our norms and our practices, and we need to take it seriously that those norms need to be codified into law. But we rely on them to make sure that we can have normal working order. Normally the FBI director has experience before he gets appointed, before he gets recommended to that position. That was not the case in this administration. Normally, any official has experience in their field of office. But this administration is very comfortable throwing out norms. And my point is we need to take it seriously that those norms need to be codified. And one of them is if you can only redistrict every 10 years after the census, one, you have the most up-to-date numbers. So we're working with the best data available. The second part of that is that there is a normal course of business that you can expect. People can prepare for it. They can advocate on a regular calendar to be able to be prepared for changes that might go into effect. But when Republicans play political games and throw this onto the calendar in random cycles that people weren't expecting it becomes a political game through and through. You take any semblance of nonpartisanship or out of representation for the people out of the process, because now it's not about updating the maps to make sure that populations that have moved around are re-represented. Now we're playing political games about who gets to represent who.
Okay, and before I let Austin respond, what do you say to your fellow Democrats who, I think the reason Virginia was 2 points and not 7 is I still think there are some Democrats who say, I can't vote for this. This is against my principles.
Absolutely.
What do you say to them?
I hear you. I would never ask you to vote for something that's against your principles. There's a reason why California and Virginia put this up to the people. There's a reason why Texas and Florida are not, right? Democrats respect the will of the people. Democrats want to see the people involved in the process. And at the end of the day, we're going to do our best to make sure that representation is taken seriously. So I respect their view. I don't expect them to join me in this fight if it's not something that they're comfortable with. And I look forward to turning right back around and being with them on independent commissions once the dust is settled.
Austin, do you accept the critique that says the fact that Virginia and California could only do this if the voters approved it versus Texas, possibly Indiana, not Indiana. Indiana actually kind of stood up last year and said no. And President Trump sort of famously was not happy about that. But Florida could go in the same direction without going to the voters. Do you accept the critique that says Democratic-leaning states respect the voters more because of the way they're doing it?
In a way, but at the same time, there's still a trampling of certain people's right to representation. I mean, when in Virginia, if you have a map that is 11 seats, 10 of them are Democrats, 1 of them are Republicans, and you have a turnout of anywhere from 40 to 45% consistent Republican turnout in the state, that's a huge disenfranchisement.
I don't think anybody should disagree with that.
Should we talk about the U.S. Senate?
We're going to, but just what happened in Virginia, if it's 10-1 Democrats in a state that's 53-47 blue to red,
Yeah.
red-leaning voters are disenfranchised in that state. Is that fair, Avi?
Yeah.
Okay. What about Texas now? If you're a blue-leaning voter in Texas, do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I don't think it's right. I think we have to have consistency when it comes to this issue. And that's why it's kind of disheartening, to hear, well, now we're going to do it, but in the future, when the dust settles, we'll go back to being independent. You have to have consistency with your values. And am I saying the Republican Party is the most consistent when it comes to having those values? No, but I'm saying as a Republican for myself, as a voter, I have that consistency. I think that you need to have that consistency. If you're going to have, the moral righteousness to tell people, oh, this is what's happening and this is what we're going to do, then you need to stick with that. You can't flip-flop when it's politically convenient for you.
I think in many ways our guests, one Republican, one Democrat, are closer on this and pretty well aligned on the overarching problem with gerrymandering, the fact that it does disenfranchise voters, and the ways to try to kind of safeguard against it. I do think the Supreme Court decision in 2019 makes it harder to create safeguards against it. And I saw a rather visceral reaction over there, Avi.
Yeah. I mean, the Republicans have used the Supreme Court to dismantle all kinds of norms and things that you would expect. The Voting Rights Act is not what it used to be. We lost the women's rights to choice and all kinds of freedoms and bodily autonomy because they've stacked the court with ultra-conservative folks who don't have the credentials to be there and don't take their job seriously. We see that in the public comments that they make. We see that in the rulings that they make. And instead of doing what's right for the people, they play politics at every turn.
Okay. Do you disagree or agree with that?
I don't agree with that. I think that the justices that we have, conservative or liberal, are very qualified, and they've shown through the confirmation process that they deserve a seat on the court. And they've made decisions that we might not like as voters, and I think a majority of people would say on decisions such as the overturning of Roe v. Wade that a majority of people didn't agree with it, but there wasn't a constitutional protection for it. So you have to, again, be a little objective and take a step back and say, you can't just hate on, Supreme Court justice because you don't like their decisions. They're very qualified.
By your perspective, by my perspective, they have no consistency in how they enforce the law, how they rule on cases.
Are you talking about all 6
No,
conservative?
I'm not.
You're talking about Alito, Thomas?
Yes. And
Primarily.
occasionally Kavanaugh.
Okay.
Kavanaugh's in the middle, but
You have respect for Gorsuch? Roberts?
Gorsuch is an interesting case because he has some very consistent approaches to things like Native American sovereignty that makes him much easier to palate on his other decisions because he does have consistency and he's not just ruling with his whims on every single case.
And Justice Coney Barrett?
She does a decent job.
Okay, so you're laughing over there. Why are you laughing?
But when you have a plurality that is willing to play politics on cases, that's a real problem.
Okay, so anything else you want to add there?
I just think we fundamentally disagree on that. I think that the court has done a very, very good job. And again, you could disagree with the decisions and say that they're political. I mean, inherently, any decision that they make, you can view as political. But the reasonings that they give in their briefs and in their decisions, I think are pretty consistent, and they have legal standing. You might disagree with the case law, but I mean, there is standing. There's precedent for what they're doing. So
let me start with some feedback from listeners here. I'm going to take your call there, Charlie, in a moment here. If you want to call the program, it's toll-free, 844-295-TALK, 844-295-8255. It's 263-WXXI if you call from Rochester, 263-9994. You can email the program, as always, the email address, connections@wxxi.org. You can join the chat on the YouTube channel for the WXXI News YouTube channel if you're watching there with us live here. We have Avi Presberg, Executive Director of the Monroe County Democratic Committee, Austin DeLorme, President of the University of Rochester College Republicans, and a columnist for Right Side Talks. We're talking about gerrymandering. We're talking about this sort of tit-for-tat that's going on in states like Texas and California and Virginia and perhaps others to come. And we're also talking about how to ensure that voters are respected and that these processes don't become entirely politicized. So Charlie in Seneca Falls first on the phone. Hey, Charlie, go ahead.
Good afternoon. So 2 points. If we think in terms of the modern day political era, redistricting out of term is an invention of Tom DeLay in Texas. And I'm going to put it back in the early part of this century. They redistricted way out of term because Tom DeLay said, oh, I can pick up some seats in Congress. So it is a Republican invention, certainly in modern day politics. Second comment, the New York State Redistricting Commission, which I believe was a constitutional amendment passed 15 years ago maybe, they met for I think the 2020 or the 2022 cycle, had to be the 2022. They had a lot of meetings, but the Republican Party, Republican members refused to participate. So in absence of them, there were Democrats and there were non-political people on the commission. I sat through some of their video conferencing. They came up with a reasonably fair redistricting. And as soon as it was done, the Republicans go, oh dear, they went to court. They did venue shopping to find a judge who would absolutely rule in their favor, threw it back out, and we end up with a New York 24 that does stretch from effectively Niagara Falls to Alexandria Bay. The Republican gentleman who's trying to defend what his party is doing, I believe he's speaking the party line. Good job of that, but you're not paying attention to the facts.
Well, first of all, Charlie, I appreciate the phone call, and I'm going to let Austin jump in on that. But I want to read a different, but that's Charlie on the phone. Here is a different Charlie who emails. We're starting with the Charlies here. And I want Austin to respond to this as well here. Charlie A on email says, let's not pretend that gerrymandering was anything but a power grab by the Republicans and more accurately by MAGA. Along with voter suppression, MAGA is doing everything in their power to disrupt fair elections. They are a desperate party doing desperate things to stay in power. This is not America, and I predict that when they lose in November, MAGA will cry foul. I'll bet my house on it. So Charlie's on the email is making a distinction between not just the Republican Party writ large, but the MAGA movement, which he sees as more behind what's happening with gerrymandering and with more behind what he sees as some of the more illiberal lurches. Charlie on the phone says the Republican Party in general is more, is who he would blame. Do you see a difference between MAGA and Republicans right now?
Yeah, I do. Because I classify myself as a Republican, not necessarily with the MAGA camp. And again, I can only speak for myself as a Republican voter.
Sure, yeah.
But
you don't consider yourself MAGA?
No, because I think that oftentimes, and it's very fair to have this critique that the Republican Party has become the Trump Party, which is not good. We still need to stand on principles. But into regards to the phone call from Charlie, even with those redistrict maps, the districts were more fair. They were more consolidated. They were that the judge handed down. When the judge handed down that ruling that had those 2022 redistricted maps, they were more fair. They gave better representation to the Republicans in New York State to have a better advantage of representation in Congress, and it was closer to their vote share within the last previous election statewide. So I don't know if I'd necessarily say that they were unfair maps and that they went judge shopping. I don't know much about that, but that would be my critique for that. And then for the email, with this MAGA Republican thing, it's just that. It's I do think that there is a MAGA movement of the party that's behind it, but again, as Republicans, we need to stay consistent.
Okay. Avi, what about the phone call? The concern that Charlie has is even when you get people in a room who are working on what is ostensibly a fair practice, the question is what happens when they get out in the public? Will politics break things down? And by the way, that's a concern that people have not just here, but that's a concern that Democrats might have in Texas. That's a concern that Republicans might have in Massachusetts or anywhere else. So are you concerned that politics will sort of infect the process, even if there are commissions of people who are trying to do hard work?
It's an inherently political process to pair people up with representation. There's no clean, nonpartisan way to divide up a state, a county, any jurisdiction into smaller jurisdictions, to choose who's going to represent who, and to choose who's going to vote together for their representative. I don't know. I certainly want to see less politics in it. I want to see our current elected officials completely off of the redistricting process, where they are not the ones making the decisions, because the people who are representing us should not get the chance to choose the people that are going to vote in their election.
All right, let me get Avi to respond to the next email. So thank you for Charlie for the phone call. Thank you, Charlie, for the email. The next email is from Charles.
We're on a streak.
Three
C
different
names,
people.
yeah.
And Charles, on the email, comes in from the conservative perspective. He says, I'm pretty sure New York itself would be a better example than the U.S. Senate, since the Senate is supposed to be equal representation. It was the price of the union that we have two houses that are made up differently.
Absolutely.
Avi?
Yeah, I mean, that is the price of the union, and I think that there's some value in having two houses. But when you want to talk about representation and who gets to make decisions, your voters in the Dakotas get far more of a say in the federal government than the folks in New York. So why is that not appropriately balanced by more representation in the House of Representatives?
Okay, what do you make of that there, Austin?
I mean, it is a compromise that we've had to make, and I think the Founding Fathers were very smart for having that compromise. You have to have a split, and I mean, that's why we have the House, so I don't really know what the contention would be over that. You know, the Senate is an institution in itself that is, works how it's supposed to and has that representation, maybe not in a way that is as fair, but that's why we have the House. That's why we have checks and balances between the branches.
So are you saying, Avi, that to make it more balanced, the House should have more members?
Oh, I would love to add more members to the House of Representatives. That's a great idea. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, see, this is where Republicans say, of course that's what you want.
Yeah, people get more access to their representatives. How many people can call on office, in one day? And more than the people who, right? More people want representation by their elected officials than they can actually receive.
But obviously,
so more representatives, that's the argument.
Americans are weird because Americans hate Congress. I mean, Congress's approval rating is like the approval rating of hangnails.
Absolutely.
But people also reelect their own congressperson
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
at a very high rate. So they tend to say, on one hand, yeah, my person's fine. It's the rest of Congress that's terrible. I don't know, though, Avi, that Americans would share your desire to see even more people in Congress.
That's all right. I can be alone in that if I need to be.
Okay. Do you want
There's
more
a
people
reason
in
why I don't
Congress?
get to call the
No,
shots.
no, I do not.
You don't? Okay.
Too much bloat.
Do you want more members on the Supreme Court, Avi?
That's a really interesting idea. I think that there are some really important reforms, and rather than potentially more people on the Supreme Court could work, but I would be much more interested in getting rid of the lifetime terms and returning to the original format of the U.S. Supreme Court, where members of other lower courts were assigned to sit on that court for a period of time and then were cycled off. I think that is the best way to preserve the institution of the Supreme Court and to ensure that justices are likely to rule consistently throughout their term and not be swayed over the course of their entire career to trying to bend the law in a certain direction.
Okay. What do you make of that, Austin?
No, I think that the court, as how it's set up now, is pretty good, and expanding the court is not good, because I think having a flexible nature to the court provides a lot of problems when we have vacancies or a president comes in and is trying to have certain policies or laws that they're trying to push through Congress or are challenged in the courts that then get decided upon by the court. Lifelong appointments, I think, are good because they create a system in which a judge continues to be fair and impartial. The only exception that I could possibly see is maybe an age limitation, because we've seen that instituted in New York with our own court system, and that seemed to work pretty well at being able to, have new judges and turnover and keeping the court, fresh with different perspectives. But I don't know if that necessarily is something that we should do at a national level.
I want to explore just this idea that you have that a lifetime appointment would take politics out of it. isn't it possible that if a justice knows they're in it for life no matter what, that they can become more ideological without consequence?
I mean, you definitely could make that argument, but at the same time, if you have a judge that is worried about, oh, my term's up in 5 years, I have to make up or I have to decide on these cases a certain way, so I'm fulfilling, some sort of internal duty that they made to, political power or party, that is also equally as concerning. So I can see both perspectives, but I think at the end of the day, we've had lifetime appointments on the court, and it's worked pretty well in our nation's history.
Did you think that President Biden's cognitive decline was a problem?
I did, which is why I say, even though I think that the lifetime appointment is good, I do flirt with the idea of age limitation sometimes.
The reason I struggle with this is if you're not careful, you can quickly move into ageism.
Mm-hmm.
And there are 90-plus-year-olds who I find sharper than some 58-year-olds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the reality of the course of time and life and health is that cognition and memory and sharpness will erode over time. That is not to insult anybody who is older than me in advancing age. I mean, I hope that's all of us someday, right? So I don't know how you would find the exact number. I mean, is it 75? Is it 70? Is it 80? Is it 90? I don't know what the number is, and I don't want to engage in ageism.
Yeah.
But I thought the critique of President Biden was fair, that people were concerned about what was going on with him, and I would feel the same about members of the Supreme Court if they are exhibiting signs. But now they've got a lifetime appointment. President Biden was facing 2 more years or wanted to maybe another 4-year term. If you're, whatever age you are, but you're really struggling with cognitive decline on the Supreme Court, you can stay there as long as you like.
And I think that's something that, again, Republicans seem to be consistent on, because in the lead up to the 2024 election, we had candidates such as Nikki Haley saying, I want to have term limits on certain positions, either in Congress or for the presidency. And then we kind of backed away and stopped pushing on that issue. So we need to be consistent on that. Do we want to have that as a party? Do we not want to have that as a party? Is that something that's going to be part of the party platform that we advocate for in the future? I think it's an interesting question. I don't have necessarily all the answers to that question, but it's something that we do need to look at further. And I agree that we have some very, very talented and gifted people that continue to serve on the court. I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was an absolutely amazing justice. Even though she was a liberal, she was an absolutely amazing mind for the court. And she lived to a very old age and continued to make really, really good decisions.
Well, I mean, I don't know if Avi feels like she made the right decision in not retiring.
No comment.
You don't want to comment on that? I know plenty of Democrats
it's not that
now
fun to
who
play
respect
that game.
her,
Yeah.
but are disappointed with her choices and what that led to.
I think there are some more serious fundamental problems with the Supreme Court that make it not worth trying to get into the mind of our former Supreme Court justice.
Fair enough. So 2 other points on this, and then we'll do is after our only break of the hour, I'll get some more feedback from listeners. Because we're talking redistricting, we're talking gerrymandering, we're talking other norms or, frankly, other possible reforms that could improve or erode the system. And we'll welcome feedback from listeners on this. So, Avi, 2 things here. For the moment, Austin does not want to change the lifetime appointment on the court. Again, how long should a term be for a justice?
I don't know. It's a really good question. I don't have a great number right now off the top of my head. I mean,
but not a lifetime appointment?
No, I think the lifetime appointments inherently corrupt people. I think that you can see that, especially when you pair lifetime appointments with a court that has no ethics rules that they enforce. So you can go hang out with your billionaire buddies and then rule on a case with them for them, and nobody can say anything and nobody can hold you accountable to that matter, especially when the Republicans in Congress have completely abdicated their role, and the idea of ever holding a Supreme Court justice accountable for their actions through formal investigation or impeachment, completely laughable. And that really gets back to this redistricting conversation, right? People want to see this government held accountable for its actions. And that's Democrats, that's Republicans, that's independents. And it doesn't matter whether the administration's Democratic or Republican. It matters that they get held accountable, and this administration has fought accountability at every turn through the Supreme Court, through lack of action in Congress, and through ignoring all norms that we establish.
So how about a 14-year term?
Sure.
20-year term?
It's an interesting number.
Okay. So you're open to the idea of the number matters less than not a lifetime appointment.
Yes.
Okay.
I think 20 does start to get pretty long.
That's a long time.
Because
so
of that,
maybe 10, 14?
10, 14. I mean, we have 15-year terms in New York State.
Yeah,
we have
do.
10-year terms in New York State. And it really allows those judges to go and do their job, but then they have to go back up for election and be held accountable to the people.
Okay. Austin's concerned that if we allow for an expansion of the court,
Mm-hmm.
that when one administration is in power or one party's in power, it expands to 15 members.
Sure.
But then the party that's out of power wins an election. Now they're going to expand it to 17 or 21
Yeah,
members.
absolutely.
And isn't this going to be a spiral?
It could be. It could be. You could have a president call for redistricting in one state, and then the next party could respond by redistricting in another state, and it could go just like that. It would go just like that. So I think that it's important to acknowledge there's a reason. I mean, President Biden was thwarted by the Supreme Court more times than any of the other president in history. The shadow docket came to under existence under President Obama, but they didn't expand the court. Now, let's think for a moment about what President Trump would do if there was a liberal majority on the court. Let's think about it. What do we think would happen under this president if there was a liberal majority on the Supreme Court coming into his term? What do we think would happen?
He might be congenial.
Do we think he's going to hold at 9? Do we think that if this
You're
Supreme
saying you think
Court,
he would move to expand the court?
Do you think that this president, with this Supreme Court, if they were ruling against him, that he wouldn't entertain expanding
this
the court?
court has ruled against him a number of times
on several matters that are important, but they have given him unbelievable wins in other places.
Okay. So, Austin, do you think that this president would seek to expand the court if it was a 6-3 liberal majority?
I think that he may, but at the same time, I think that Congress would not allow him to. I do not think that Republicans would allow President Trump.
Do you think they'd let him start a war without authorization?
I mean, we're kind of seeing how that's playing out right now, but that is a completely different issue.
Do you think they'd hold his kids accountable if they abused their powers to enrich themselves?
Again, still a different issue. You can't compare apples to oranges and say that it's all part of the same thing.
I think Avi's argument is just that this is a Republican Congress that hasn't sought to check the president's power in any meaningful way.
At the same time, the court is a very, very storied, historic institution that both parties have kind of come to a consensus about what it's going to look like and how it was shaped for generations and years before us. And we haven't seen this drastic expansion or anything of that nature from the executive onto the court like that. So I again don't think that, and again it comes back to what happens if roles were reversed, and then we have
roles were reversed. Biden didn't try to appoint anybody,
and we didn't have an expansion.
Republicans refused to even hold confirmation hearings for President Obama, and he made no attempt to appoint a justice outside of the normal process. And I would have argued, and as a teenager, I was probably, pretty angry and overly zealous on this. But I argued as a teenager that the Republicans in the Senate abdicated their role to provide advice and consent, and therefore President Obama should have the authority to put the justice on the court himself. Now, it's a good thing that teenage me didn't have that authority to do it himself, but it's a matter of consistency across all of these issues. And when you have a Republican Party that is willing to cave on every point, it really begs the question of why are you crying foul on the theoretical idea of expanding the court?
Anything to add?
I think that it's hypocritical. Again, you have at the same time that you're saying when it happened back in 2015, we were crying foul. Then we have a similar situation that happened under another administration, and we're trying to say that the roles are gonna. You wanted the roles reversed. I mean, how do you have that argument? I don't understand that.
Well, I am beyond late for the only break of the hour. Let's do that. We're going to come right back with Austin DeLorme, president of the University of Rochester College Republicans. He's a columnist for Right Side Talks. Avi Presberg is executive director of the Monroe County Democratic Committee. We'll come right back. More of your feedback next on Connections.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Mary Cariola Center, proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson, believing an informed and engaged community is a connected one. marycariola.org.
This is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Maureen in Canisius says, here's a voice from New York 24, which is a district we've been talking about, the big district. She says, as a longtime listener from Livingston County, I was delighted to hear Evan and his guests discuss my district, New York 24. I listened to and read hours of the independent redistricting commission hearings and reports. Due to our population migration tendencies, I concede New York's congressional districts will change. Indeed, I have lived here for nearly 30 years, and I remember when Kathy Hochul was our congresswoman. As a voting member, I want to live in a district whose boundaries reflect my neighbors and my economic and social values, not just the majority political party. And I want a member of Congress who has the guts to actually meet her constituents in person. That's from Maureen in Canisius. NY24 is Congresswoman Tenney, isn't it? Congresswoman Tenney has not met with us either, Maureen, and I hope that will change, and that invitation is going to always stay open for Congresswoman Claudia Tenney. But so far, no luck there. Austin, what do you make of Maureen's comments there?
I think it's a very good point. And when you have a district that is that large and that spread out, it's very hard, kind of as Avi alluded to, with having representation that you're able to get in contact with. When you have a district that large, it's very hard to connect to communities that you represent. And when they're that spread out, part of, federal regulations and laws and also New York state laws when it comes to the redistricting question is that you have, continuous lines, communities that are together, that are along not just political lines, but also racial, ethnic, socioeconomic status. And it's very, very hard to justify that when you see districts like New York 24.
Avi, you want to add to that?
I'm just very curious what the person who wrote in has to what they think about the current state of the district. If they've reviewed so much of the testimony and they lived it themselves, do they feel like the district represents has a similar socioeconomic and other features that make it cohesive? Or if, like Austin's saying, if the large geographic nature of it makes it too challenging to represent, I would lean towards, I think it's probably a cohesive socioeconomic area that has pretty similar needs from end to end. But I don't know that. I don't live in that district. I've never lived in that district. So I'd be very curious to see what they have to say about that.
Maureen, follow up with us. We'll talk more about NY24. We'd love to talk to your congresswoman. David in Obed says, other countries, notably Canada and the UK, use independent electoral commissions to draw legislative boundaries. Why is the U.S. so uniquely unable to do this? Gerrymandering makes a mockery of this nation's claim to be the world's best democracy. It simply isn't. That's David in Ovid. Tim, and I actually don't know where Tim is. Tim says, Evan referenced President Obama's recent comments about gerrymandering for all the hypocrisy you need. That is from Tim. I think Tim is probably referring to a little video mashup, and we've actually pulled it apart. Heritage has been sending that out this week. So back in 2018, President Obama had this to say about the problem of gerrymandering.
Today, technology lets the party in power precision draw the map in a way that packs the other party's supporters into as few congressional districts as possible. It's why your district might be shaped like a corkscrew. But it's also how a party gains more seats while winning fewer votes, which isn't fair. It means that politicians don't have to worry as much about a serious challenge from the other side. That moves our debate from the rational, reasonable middle, where most Americans are, to the extremes.
That's President Obama in 2018. And Heritage has been sharing the clip of President Obama this week talking about the Virginia redistricting vote.
In April, Virginians can respond by making sure your voting power is not diminished by what Republicans are doing in other states. This amendment gives you the power to level the playing field in the midterms this fall. And voters will have the final say over what the maps look like. This is the responsible thing to do.
So, Avi, he says it's the responsible thing to do this week.
Yeah.
After 8 years ago, putting this video out that was kind of a lesson on
Yeah.
the evils of gerrymandering. And a lot of conservatives are saying, rank hypocrisy. What do you see?
I think it's it's sad that we are in the position that we're in. The Democrats have to make the choice between the stance that we've had, that independent commissions are the way to go, and knowing that if we do nothing, the Republicans will hold on to the control of the House, and there will be no checks on this administration. And I think that many Democrats, including the former president, have come to the conclusion that we have to have this fight. And even as it stands right now, with the states that have talked about it, Republicans stand to still go into the midterms with an edge. They're expected to have like a 2-3 seat edge versus where we are right now after the dust settles on all of the different redistricting efforts. The ones in Democratic states being approved by the voters, and the ones in Republican states being approved exclusively by the legislature, being lobbied by President Trump.
Do you feel like you can consistently make the comments that Obama made in 2018, President Obama talking about the evils of gerrymandering, and say, for the moment, we have to set that aside?
Unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, we have to, because it's our only path to holding this administration accountable and providing any check on their rampant abuses of power.
Austin, what do you make of the two different comments from Obama there?
There's so much flip-flopping that's going on. And as much as I disagree with the Republicans for what they've been doing, at least they've been consistent with their messaging. And now I think it was kind of alluded to earlier of like, with Virginia, Republicans could still win some of these seats if they go out and get voters to support them. And at the same time, it's not necessarily true. I mean, like, you're making that argument in Virginia, and then in Texas when they do it, you're saying, oh, well, that's unfair. So it's like, so you can do it in Virginia because we did it in Texas, but at the same time, you're saying we have to work harder in Virginia to get their votes, but it shouldn't have been done in Texas. So
no,
then
I think what you did in Texas is actually going to backfire. I think that Democrats are going to pick up seats, and I think it's possible or likely that this map is not 10-1 in Virginia, because when you dilute when you dilute your voters amongst more districts, you inherently make it more likely that you lose those seats. So I think that everybody's playing a messy game, but the only choice is to play when the rules have been set by your competitor.
I think it's like if you and I had houses and properties next door to each other, and there's a straight line dividing our property. And then one day I came home and you had set up a patio into my space. And I said, what are you doing there? And you said, well, like, I know you may not like it, but we're going to do it. We feel like we can get away with it. We're going to do it. Yeah. And so I would have to say, well, am I going to give up part of my yard to a neighbor who didn't ask? Or do I have to do what I don't want to do, which is take part of your yard?
I was going to say, what is the consistent position then? Like, is it then another right to do the same thing to the other person? I mean, like I said, I don't like gerrymandering. I don't like this process of midterm redistricting.
But Republicans have no problem with it. Your party started this. So where is the consistency in the Republican position where you're willing to redistrict when it's convenient for you, but you want to attack Democrats when we do it? The Democratic position right now is, you're going to do this, we're going to do this, we'll see you after the case.
Right now.
Yeah. And the Republican position is, we're going to continue to do this forever, and you should put up with it. Why should Democrats put up with the position that Republicans will continue to gerrymander whenever it's convenient for them, but Democrats have to say, well, we believe that independent commissions are the gold standard, but right now we have to do something else.
But I don't think that's been the messaging, and I do not. Well, I would like to say, again, I differentiate myself from many Republicans. That is not something that I want. I want these independent commissions and these ways of redistricting. But then at the same time, again, it continues to go back and forth. And this party, the Democrat Party, which was the bastion of, this liberal democracy that is going to have this type of representation, is now turning around and saying, well, it's convenient for us now because the Republicans are doing it.
Because there are more important things going on. People are dying all over this world because of this administration. So yes, we have to put that value on hold to save people's lives.
So we should repress people's rights to representation because of these ambiguous issues.
We should play the game that Republicans have set up in order to ensure that people are taken care of in the future.
That's a dangerous message for democracy.
All right, so
dangerous to not hold the president accountable.
It's a dangerous message for democracy.
All right, so Let me grab Ingrid in Penfield, who gets kind of the last word here, about 30 seconds or less. Go ahead, Ingrid.
Avi, thank you for your service. Austin, I hope that you get yourself on the right side of history. It's not a good time to be a Republican. I'm sorry. Those words from Obama were not hypocritical. They were Obama finally getting smart. It is very challenging when you are a good person to realize that an abusive person or group of people or even a party might play absolutely dirty. The only answer, as sad as it is to temporarily play dirty also. And that's what you're seeing now, and I'm very thankful that finally, it's a terrible compromise to have to make, but the Republicans made it happen. Thanks.
Ingrid, thank you for the phone call. Well, let me just close with this. Both of our guests do want to see independent commissions. Both of our guests want to see this practice, this spiral stop.
And that makes me hopeful for the future of the Republican Party.
The two of you have disagreed on some things and agreed on plenty this hour. Austin, are you hopeful that we will get out of the spiral and find independent ways of redistricting in the future?
I am. And I think that post-Trump presidency, things will stabilize when we come to 2030 census and redistricting in 2030.
Okay. Are you hopeful about this, Avi?
If there are more Republicans like Austin, we're going to be just fine. Our future is in good hands if this is who I have to work with across the aisle. As you can see, we agreed on so much. We disagree on the core right now, but that's all right.
I'll take that compliment. And same to you.
Well, listen, that's part of what we're trying to do here is have dialogue to at least understand each other. You don't have to disagree with your neighbor, your friends, your family, your colleagues across political aisle and everything, but we got to be able to talk, and I'm grateful for the time from Austin DeLorme, president of the University of Rochester College Republicans. He's a columnist for Right Side Talks. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Evan.
And thanks to Avi Presberg, executive director of the Monroe County Democratic Committee. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
More connections coming up with Senator Jeremy Cooney next.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.